Teachers of Reddit with foreign students, what is the worst case of I don't know this culture that you've experienced? I was in the middle of my second year of teaching before I learned that my Asian students were showing respect for me by refusing to make eye contact. I thought they hated me so much they couldn't look at me. The only reason that I learned is that I was at a soccer game supporting my students when I told another teacher that I thought one of them hated me because he would never look at me when I spoke to him. A student sitting in front of me turned around and said, "Is he Asian?" and I said that yes, he was. The student said, "Not looking you in the face is a sign of respect." We had a great 20 or 30 minute conversation about it, where she told me she was Korean and that she looked her teachers in the face all the time because it's an act of aggression. I asked her a whole bunch of ignorant questions and she answered them all. It was enlightening. After that, she stopped by my room every day and said hi. She was a great girl. She looked her teachers in the face all the time because it's an act of aggression. Alpha. When I was in kindergarten in the US, we had a Swedish student who everyone called Michael. Nobody thought anything out of the ordinary until he wore his first dress. Turns out her name was Michaela, and due to the language barrier and her boyish clothes, haircut, appearance, the teachers thought she was a boy. I wouldn't bat an eye today at the confusion, but 5-year-old me was completely mind-fricked. I worked at a water park that hired a lot of teenagers from outside the US, primarily Eastern Europe. As a guard, we had to undergo rescue and emergency training for a week. When learning CPR, they listed one of the steps as point and asked someone to dial 911. After 3 hours of CPR practice, I heard one kid ask his friends, "What is the 911? I say it, but I do not know." I realized that nowhere in the training does it ever explain to the international guards who to call or where to get professional help in an emergency. Call 911. Start shouting, "911, 911. Where are you, 911?" There was this kid from China. This was way back when Western culture wasn't as prominent in Asia. One day, he just went around flipping everyone off and laughing at their reactions. We had to teach him that this was a very rude gesture and not to do that here. I teach in Vietnam and a lot of the kids definitely know they shouldn't be flipping people off, but they absolutely love doing it, LOL. As well as saying what the fuck and wanting their team name to be crap. A friend of mine teaches English as a foreign language in China. The kids he teaches are completely obsessed with Western culture. Anything, and I mean anything, they see in American magazines they try to imitate. Which is why on a non-uniform day, one of the 9-year-old girls came dressed as a state trooper thinking it was a cool outfit. That is a really cool outfit, though. My Spanish teacher during my freshman year was really big into welcoming exchange students to our school. One day during class, our teacher just had to meet the Russian exchange student. So she walks over to his class and the teacher tells her that the exchange student had gone to the bathroom. So my teacher turns around and sees a kid leaving the bathroom. She runs over, introduces herself, and tries to bring him to our class. The kid says something unintelligible, which my teacher just thought was just the exchange student's accent, and drags him over to our class. The teacher introduces this student as the Russian exchange student as he stands in the doorway just mortified. After a couple awkward minutes, my teacher takes the student back to his class. When she got back, our class informed her that she did not meet the exchange student, but instead dragged a kid with fairly low functioning autism in front of our class to parade around like a celebrity. I don't think she ever lived that one down. Sounds like Peggy Hill. It was me. I moved to the US and some kids asked me if I ever lived in the ghetto. They were confused when I explained that no, but my grandfather did when the Nazis discovered he was Jewish sympathizer. I am a teacher in South Korea and have been here a while. It's pretty hilarious seeing new teachers sometimes. Here, a teacher is almost an extension of your family. A kid, little, pre-K 2nd grade, will regularly say they love you and want to hug you, and you come off as cold if you don't. Imagine an aunt that refuses to hug a niece. Anyways, a Canadian teacher comes and after about a week, one of her students liked her a lot. God knows why. She was a B. Anyways, she runs to hug teacher and teacher melts down in panic. "Nouru, I can't touch you, Nouru," and physically pushes the kid away and runs around the school to get away. Other kids think this is hilarious and chase her. Needless to say, she was not a long timer. You can imagine she would be wary of doing something that back home could get you arrested or at least fired. I was teaching English in Russia about 6 years ago and had a really nice upper intermediate class in central Moscow. Adults and all pretty well educated professionals taking evening classes to improve job prospects, etc. I did a class one time on superlatives. Best, worst, most important, etc. The textbook I was using had a list of question prompts. Best, worst invention, that kind of thing. Some of them were a bit weird, but they were there to simulate discussion in English. One of them was best leader in times of crisis. But that wasn't a terribly good discussion point, because they were unanimous. Stalin. Every last one of them put Stalin. To teach here, I had to take a bunch of classes on culture, especially the local cultures. We are one of the cities that took an influx of Hmong refugees during the diaspora that occurred during the Korean and Vietnam Wars, what the Hmong refer to as the Secret War. Don't pat them on the head, that's where they keep their soul. We consider having imaginary friends a completely normal and logical progression of a child's imagination and psychological development. In the case of the Hmong, you have to inform the parents, because there are no imaginary friends in their culture, only spirits, and a shaman must be called to perform ritual to heal the child. If they go home and start interacting with the imaginary friend you've seen them interact with at school, the parents will freak out, so you have to let them know before that occurs. Weekends begin on Thursday for them if there is a cultural event happening, weddings, funerals, and the soul calling for a newborn baby. So be prepared to give them early work to turn in Monday if your students or their parents tell you on Wednesday that they will be gone Thursday, Friday for a family event. If you are working with older teens, you must be prepared for your 14 to 16-year-old students to possibly have to miss 2 weeks because it's their own wedding, and they have rituals to take part in before the ceremony. You must be prepared for the female married students to get pregnant, and be pregnant at school, and then miss 2 weeks for maternity leave. But they'll be right back as they have family members who are there to care for the baby while they finish their education. Some of your Hmong students may be shaman, and will be on call while in your class, and there are times where they will get a call, take it outside, and then quietly let you know they must leave, as someone of their lineage has died, or has had a baby, or has come down ill, and they must go to perform ritual for the family. It is amazing and interesting, and I'm so glad that I took the classes, because these things are of overwhelming importance to their culture and their people. There are no Hmong schools where a person can go and learn. It is almost entirely taught by your family to you, and it's done by actually having you do the stuff. I was lucky enough to also be able to take a GE Hmong language course that was 50% Hmong history and culture, from a French Hmong professor with a PhD in Hmong, and it gave me amazing additional insight. Story from my education professor. One time after the school day had finished, she was in the staff room marking some papers. Out of the window she saw a rather new student, who had fled from the Middle East with his family, running to the bathroom carrying his soak jacket in his hands. At first she didn't think much of it, but she saw him make a few trips to the bathroom, each time coming out of it with his jacket dripping wet. She went outside to ask him what he was doing, and he just ran away to the playground. Following the boy, she saw one of his classmates laying on the ground in a pool of blood. Apparently the kid was mucking around jumping off ledges and smacked his head. The foreign student saw what happened and must have reverted back to an experience of his old homeland. To clarify, he had been running back and forth between the bathrooms and his injured classmate to try and calm the bleeding with his wet jacket. Not necessarily the worst, but it just went to show that this 13-year-old kid had experienced some heavy crap if his first reaction was to perform ad lib first aid, rather than to seek help from an adult. My European. From memory I think he was Dutch. Classics lecturer at uni had some issues with translating certain words. I do not know what it is in English. It's a cornucopia in my language. I do not know what the word is. It is a gangbang in my language. I believe it's a sex. Speaking about cornucopias, orgies and sodomy respectively. TBF Dutch Afrikaans is quite similar to English. I have a friend from Finland who lived in the USA in her early teens. She was asked to make a slideshow of life back home which included a recent picture of the whole 5-person family, 2 parents, 3 kids, naked together in a sauna. Something very normal in Finland and even integral to Finnish culture. The teacher freaked out, got CPS involved and created a big mess in their lives. I had a student that was fresh off the boat from Africa. He claimed to be from a royal family and said he was very wealthy back home. The other students were entertained by his stories of mansions, multiple wives and pet lions. It was like the movie Coming to America had come to life and was sitting right in front of us. After a few weeks he decided that I was his most favorite teacher, and since I didn't have children he offered me several of his. He offered to have his royal family put me up in their mansion, then hand over a few spare kids they didn't need anymore. It's nice that someone finally gave that Nigerian prince their bank account number so he could leave his country. Well, today I got in an argument with my students about a watermelon being a fruit or not. Japan classes fruits and vegetables differently, I guess. I taught an ESL class with maybe 15 young adults, Chinese, Saudis, Mexicans. One day I'm lecturing, when all of a sudden a Chinese student leans to his side and belts out a loud fart. He then calmly repositions himself and continues his note-taking. The Saudis and Mexicans look at me, look at him, look back at me, and then explode into hysterical laughter. One of the Saudis fell out of his chair because he was laughing so uncontrollably and continued to roll on the ground sobbing and gasping for air between laughs. The Chinese students, maybe 4 or 5 of them, didn't understand what was funny, but all of the Saudis and Mexicans were very amused. As for me, I turned towards the board and cracked up as quietly as I could, my shoulders bouncing up and down for a full 30 seconds. Not a teacher. UK story here. My classmate had asked our professor before a formal event, "Do I need to wear pants?" He meant pants as in trousers, but in the UK, pants is equivalent to underwear, boxers. So the professor just took a slight pause and said yes. That and the hand sign for 2 tripped me up so goddamn much when I first moved to the UK. When I was a student in an American high school, I raised my hand and asked for a rubber. In my country that's what we call an erasure, and I had no idea it meant condom in the US. I only understood the awkward reaction a few months afterwards. ESL teachers in China get a rude awakening sometimes when every student turns in the exact same paper. Copying is seen as WE, because the task was simply to complete the assignment. Where this really gets interesting is when Chinese students come to the US and create these elaborate cheating rings at colleges. I wasn't a teacher, but at age 16 my boss had me go out to the pool and explain to a whole family of Mexicans that their kids could not swim naked in the apartment complex. He was exasperated and barely spoke any English and just kept saying, "But they're kids." I can understand that. When I was a kid, in the UK, if it were a warm day I might run around naked in my back garden playing with a sprinkler, paddling pool or whatever. That moment when I taught special needs kindergarten in Egypt, we sang a song and I included fingers motioning towards my palm in the physical response, and all the co-teachers at the back of the class burst out laughing. So apparently I had a bunch of little kids with Down syndrome happily signaling frick you at me as language practice. Happy days. I had an Indian kid once that was absolutely terrified of vampires. He didn't understand why we thought that they were just fictional monsters. Also, he didn't call them vampires, he called them wampires. Indian here, V and W are same to us, can't notice the difference while listening. Not exactly international, but worth telling. I was student teaching a kindergarten class in the US. It was in a really small town, occupied mostly by retiring hippies. One of our students, in that first day of school, came from the neighboring Native American reservation. I later learned that his grandmother was chief, and that first day of school was the first day this child had left the reservation. So during recess the kids are let out to play in their play area, a play structure and toys, fenced in. The aide is outside supervising. The teacher is at her desk going over the rest of the day, and I'm standing in the doorway, listening to my advising teacher while looking out occasionally at the kids. Suddenly the teacher flips her lid. Apparently the kid I'm talking about had climbed to the roof of the play structure. The teacher tells me to get him down. I went outside, asked him to get down, made sure he didn't fall while doing so, and talked about it with the aide. That's when she told me the kid's history. She told me that she knew the kid's family, and that until today, he'd been allowed to climb as high on things as he wanted. He didn't understand that the roof of the play structure was off limits. He was just playing, and had no idea he'd done something wrong. Unfortunately, the teacher I was working for didn't see it that way. She reprimanded him, and labeled him, on his first day of school, as a troublemaker. Over the next few weeks I saw this kid continue to struggle with the teacher, continue to get punishments, and, after only 2 weeks, he saw himself as the bad boy the teacher had labeled him as. To my great relief, a meeting was called. I am guessing that the awesome aide had already spoken with the teacher. The teacher recognized that her discipline from day one was not helping, it was only making things worse. The aide had the chance to voice that this child had essentially come from a different culture with different rules. It was unreasonable to expect him to know all of our rules, and unfair to punish him for wrongs he didn't understand committing. The teacher proposed that we scrapple his punishment and start working with positive reinforcements for good behavior. The change was amazing. That kid really liked being a good boy, and once he fully understood what was expected of him, was a model student. That's not even entirely a culture thing. Little kids enjoy climbing. Had a student from Egypt once in my US government class. We had an essay about what would the framers of the Constitution think about politics today. Before I got the chance to read it, he came up to me about 3 days after the essay and said, "Mr. Lithanalet, can I please rewrite my essay? I thought it said farmers, not framers." I read the whole thing. It was actually incredible. He admitted it was weird for him to write, but he discussed how people in rural areas wouldn't be happy because politicians probably don't really care about what they think and stuff like that. I did let him rewrite it though. I mean, if it was incredible, you should have just given him an A. I had a Chinese exchange student here in Idaho once, and I asked him to write a few sentences about himself, like his hobbies and favorite music shows, that he'd like to share with his new classmates on our communication board. After staring at me blankly for a very long time, he wrote down "I am good Idaho potato" on a piece of paper and stapled it to the communication board. None of us knew what he meant whatsoever, but we rolled with it. I like to believe that, in our hearts, we are all good Idaho potatoes. We are all good Idaho potatoes on Thid Blessed Day. I had a kid from Turkey in my Holocaust class and he didn't believe in the Armenian genocide. They still say it didn't happen over there. He was totally polite about it though. Not a teacher, but I was beautifully handled by my Parisian professor for being the student that did the thing. I did a very unintentionally bad thing. I made a magnificent multimedia presentation about the Tenebrist movement in late Renaissance art. I cared so much about making it gorgeous and interesting. I wanted it to feel what the artists felt, explore misconceptions and inspire my native French speaking classmates with my final thesis-like presentation about it. I made a website, meticulously placed each image and clip to perfection. I even did some coding myself because the templates I used couldn't do what I wanted the site to do. I practice over and over about what to say, with little puns interwoven with relatable anecdotes about life at that time. Welp. Giant nope. Although my work was the best I could make it, and I do know R-rated words in French, what I didn't know is that, as I was describing the controversy about artists using prostitutes as models, and how unfairly the models and artists were treated for it, I thought I was using slang for prostitute, but what I was really saying was US version of C. So I stood presenting for 45 minutes, calling a whole lot of famous subjects C, and then talking about who the real C of the situation are, those who express the art, the subjects, or the governments. Aren't they all C in some way or another? I got a lot of looks. My prof was amazing about it. He pulled me aside later and explained what I did. It was clearly really hard for him to keep a straight face. He had a good enough grasp on me to know that it was a fluke. I almost cried at the time from shame. He gave me an A on the project. It was a really good project, aside from enthusiastically calling revered people C about 30 times. Not me, but my mom used to teach at a Montessori school in Japan. We're white Americans and my dad was Air Force. The kids thought my mom was magical because she has natural red hair. My mom thought they were crazy. It's true, it's a thing in Japan. They have a freaking gigantic thing about Anne of Green Gables there because of her hair. They even call her Anne of the red hair. I'm not a teacher, but in 6th grade there was this French boy in our class. They split us into groups for sex ed and the first thing he did was raise his hand and ask if we were going to watch P. He thought we were learning how to have sex. This is probably less of a French thing and more of a 6th grader thing. I worked at a summer camp in China as an English teacher. Just a fun, conversational English course. The matter of fact style really didn't mesh with my Minnesota nice. We had an ice cream treat once a day, and I was told by one of the host teachers, in front of the student, Dylan cannot have ice cream because he is fat, which of course launched me into all sorts of excuses on the boy's account, but he only replied, "It is okay miss, I am fat." It also led to a lot of uncomfortable parent-teacher conferences, where the parents would thank me for educating their children even if they are only girls. I'm Chinese. To be fair, the word fat in Chinese isn't very offensive. It's just like you have diabetes, so eat less ice cream. We had a class exchange Bavaria Montreal. It's very common to mispronounce I am called X for I crap X in German. So we were introducing ourselves to the German classmates and the guy with braces basically told everyone he was expulsing some dude from his butt. To be fair, unless you're in grade school you sound equally stupid using ich he's to a German speaker. I wasn't a teacher in Korea, but I am a Korean American and have friends who went to Korea to teach. The common WTF experience all teachers, especially if you are male, is the kids they teach always try to them. Literal translation is butt shot. This act is carried out by taking both hands, clasping them together with both index fingers out like a gun and proceeding to poke the unsuspecting target's butthole. It's like a cultural pastime for kids in Korea and everyone of Korean descent has been the perp or victim multiple times in their lives. Then later they grow up and perform the motorcycle. If you are a man, this it is performed by tripping wrestling another man to the ground, grabbing their legs in a spread eagle fashion and placing your foot on their genitals and shaking your foot as if you are starting riding a motorcycle. This mostly happens in college after drinking. Think of it as a WTF version of table topping here in the US. Teacher at a school in China. A kid basically said that he really wanted to study in Germany because the Nazis were great. Some Chinese people view strongmen and leadership much differently than Americans. In a lot of British and French colonies, Hitler is seen as a strongman who brought the British to their knees. Murdering Jews was no worse than what the British perpetrated on them. To them, if someone was so strong that he was making the British pee their pants, he must be very strong indeed. I'm not sure if this counts, but we had all the foreign exchange students join the rest of the school in our gymnasium for anti-drug motivational speaking. This was in the midst of the huge Nancy Reagan funded war on drugs era of the late 90s early 2000s. We had speakers who were addicts, ex-cons, former pimps who told stories about former crack hoes. He often used a different term, but it often slipped when repeating dialogue. But the big one was this guy who survived his own suicide. A shotgun blast to his own face. I liked him, he seemed kind, and showed he had a good sense of humor by removing his prosthetic lower jaw and raising it like a hat. However, when he brought out the pictures on the slides and pointed with a laser pointer, as you can see if you look carefully into the pool of blood you can see pieces of my jaw and teeth that were blown away. Suddenly murmuring was stirring and the lights turned on, and a lot of the German girls and this one big Scottish guy had fainted. Though sexually prudish, the US has a tolerance for violence within the heck of poverty at that point in the country. We'd had so many of those speeches it was like monthly church to us. Another don't rape sexually comment have sex or do anything. For boys, don't be a s. For girls, don't do drugs smoke drink play Pokemon etc. Yes, being 13, I made sure to tease the Scottish guy who was the only boy who fainted by saying, "No wonder your country provides all their men with skirts." He gave me a look like he wanted to turn me into haggis and threw a pencil at me. Good times. P.S. He was staying at my place and we were good enough friends so no hard feelings were felt. Honestly that's a pretty sick burn. Insensitive as frick but a sick burn. My teacher said she used to live in Laos. She was teaching them English, and she was trying to tell them you. Apparently that meant penis in their language. She was teaching kids. so they kept laughing at her and she didn't know why. Hate to be that guy, but it's spelled Laos. That's hilarious yo. I tutor English as a second language online. I'm always amazed at how often my Saudi Arabian students show up for a lesson while they're driving their cars. I'm American and one time I was teaching at an all-girls school in rural Tanzania. I have a lesson I do in the US where students write an algorithm for drawing a friend. I teach computer science. Part of the activity involves me asking the class to categorize different hairstyles. In America, I have a pretty diverse class, so I always made sure to have examples of different hair textures. Going to Tanzania, I assumed all the girls would be wearing their hair like black girls in America, braids, natural curls, etc. But then I showed up in Tanzania and didn't realize that part of their uniform was either completely buzzed hair or a white hijab. Literally no other options. Thankfully the girls thought it was funny as I erased my photos and drew their two hairstyles and apologized, which thankfully is the only thing I can do in Swahili. In the end, one of the girls handed me a photo where she drew me instead and with long hair. They were also really cute because my boyfriend was with me assisting my lesson and they kept asking if his freckles were mosquito bites. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.